So with that said, I'd like to welcome everyone to our panel, Bench to Business Part 2. My name is Gordon Sheffield. I'm the Associate Director of Business Development at Seismic, and I'll be your moderator for today's panel. For those of you not familiar with Seismic, we're a talent matching platform founded by scientists to help scientists across the life sciences find their ideal jobs that leverage their entire skill set. In the words of my CEO and co-founder, Danica Kong, built by scientists for all scientists, I want scientists like me to know that they have valuable skills that can be applied in diverse ways in the science industry. There are more scientists coming out of academia than there are academic jobs for them to pursue. Scientists working in non-bench roles in STEM that leverage their entire skill set will help generate the best scientific outcomes and drive more therapies to market. That said, backed by popular demand, we're doing a part 2 of our panel event on non-bench roles in STEM to introduce you to even more career paths. Today, you'll hear from a panel of scientists on how they've applied their love of STEM, passion for innovation, and transferable skills to non-bench roles in industry with a live Q&A, which I will guide for the first part, and then an audience Q&A for you all to have a chance to ask your questions. With that said, I'd like to introduce our panel. So we'll start with Sohail Bala. Sohail, thanks so much for being here. Sohail is the Director of Business Development at Jounce Therapeutics. And if you'd like to just give a quick introduction, Sohail.
Sure, and thank you, Gordon and Seismic, for having me join today. I'm Sohail Bala, Director of Business Development at Jounce Therapeutics. Jounce is a clinical stage biotech company working on immuno-oncology focused therapies. And in my business development role, I help think through strategic partnerships that we can engage in to help advance our medicines forward. I've been with Jounce for a little under a year. Prior to joining Jounce, I was in a similar business development role at Celsius Therapeutics, which is a small biotech, Series B funded, focused on single cell genomics, doing business development as there as well. And prior to that, I was at Foundation Medicine, initially actually working on the bench side as a scientist in the clinical lab, helping develop and launch their commercial tests, their diagnostic tests, and then moving to more alliance management and business development side. Looking forward to our discussion today.
Perfect. Thanks, Sohail. Thanks for being here. So next, I see Kira's here. I haven't seen Kira face-to-face in a long time. So Kira, welcome. Kira Henderson is the Commercial Data Strategist at Cell Signaling Technology, also known as CST. Kira, welcome.
Thank you, Gordon. And actually, greetings from Portugal. My job away from the bench has allowed me to move to Europe and be a bit of a digital nomad. So there's another plug for a reason to move away from the bench. As Gordon said, my job right now is Commercial Data Science Strategist. I'm at Cell Signaling Technology. We are the best antibody company in the world, arguably, but also quantitatively based on citations. We make antibodies for research use, mostly in cancer research, neurodegenerative research, really any disease research. We are mostly research use with some applications to clinical in like exceptional areas. And I have been with CST for 8 years, and I've done several roles now in the commercial organization, from a scientific writer, editor, marketing manager, product manager, and now in this new commercial data science role. So I'll be happy to kind of talk to people about a few different types of roles away from the bench. And I'm very excited to be here.
Perfect. Thanks, Kira.
And funnily enough, Sohail and I just completed our MBAs together at Boston University.
Yes.
So it's nice to see a fellow MBA here with me.
Absolutely.
Congrats to both of you. And congrats to you, Kira, for moving to Portugal. That's amazing. And I'm both loathing and loving you right now for doing that, as it's raining here in Boston. So anyway, welcome. Next, we have Purnima Manavalan. She is the Director of Business Development at Elevate Bio. Purnima, thanks for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Gordon. And nice to see all the other panelists, Sohail, Kira, and Maya. So I work for a company called Elevate Bio, and Elevate is a technology company that is really helping partners with their cell and gene therapy needs. So we're really a disruptive player in the cell and gene therapy space right now. And my role is to really find long-term strategic partnerships that can really entail, a manufacturing contract, or it can also be, a standard R&D agreement, which involves royalties and payments associated with it. So yeah, that's just my role at Elevate. I've been in the company for about 2 months now, and prior to that, I was with Fujifilm. So I'm really new here at Elevate, and it's super exciting. I love it so far, and I'm happy to talk to you about my experience in transitioning from the bench to a BD position. So look forward to the rest of the discussion today.
Perfect. Thanks, Purnima. And last but not least, we have Maya Dubey. Maya is the Senior Technical Marketing Specialist at the Jackson Laboratory. Maya, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Gordon, for having me.
Sure.
It's great to be with an awesome group of panelists. As Gordon mentioned, I'm Maya Dubey. I am the Senior Technical Marketing Specialist with the Jackson Laboratory. I've been with Jax now for about 5 years. And really in my role, I am working a lot with voice of customer. So I develop all different types of customer facing content, whether it's print, digital, work with websites. I do a lot of the advertising, social media type of advertising as well, and content. So I wear a lot of hats, but it's a lot of fun, and it's very cool to be able to use a lot of my background from the bench and being able to translate that into helping other scientists sort of look at what Jax can do for them. And prior to Jax, I was with a marketing agency doing some program management. And then I was with, before that, I was with a company acquired by Agilent Technologies doing pretty much the same thing, content management and content marketing. So I'm really happy to talk to anybody about my experiences. So thank you.
Cool. Thanks for being here, Maya. So also here, not a panelist, but my esteemed colleague, Erin McKay. Erin is a Science Outreach Specialist at Seismic. She spearheads our job seeker events efforts. She'll be moderating the audience Q&A portion of the event. So just want to draw attention to Erin. We'll hear more from her towards the end. And a bit of housekeeping before we get started. So the format of the panel will be around 30 minutes, give or take, of moderated guided Q&A, followed by about 20 minutes or so, maybe 30 minutes of audience Q&A. You're all currently muted except for the panelists and Erin if she chooses to unmute or be muted. And we ask that you stay muted until the audience Q&A portion, at which time you'll have the ability to unmute and direct questions towards respective panelists. You can put questions in the chat at any time, so feel free to pop them in there if you like. So with that said, let's get into it. So first question, I'm going to direct probably to all of you, but to start, why don't we go with Kira? So Kira, how would you describe your current role to someone with very little experience on the commercial side of science?
Sure. So it's harder with this role than any role I've had before because it's a new role for us and for a lot of people. But basically, you can think of me as the bridge between the commercial organization, our data science teams, and biology. So because I have background in biology and part of my PhD thesis work was also in data science, I'm not a coder, I am not a data scientist, but I have now experience in the commercial area. I understand what marketing is, I understand our customers, also because I've been one. I can speak all three of those languages and I'm kind of bringing them together. So how can we use our data better to understand our customers, then serve our customers either with products or turn our data into tools? One example of things that I now kind of am the strategic owner of is like our site search engine on our website. How can we make our website friendlier to customers so they can find the antibody or the product that they need faster? Or things like recommendation engines, how can we work and get our really smart data scientists, but we need to represent what the user needs and what the scientist needs at the same time. So I'm really kind of that bridge role and how we can use our data better. And again, not a coder, not a data scientist. I'm that bridge and the strategy behind it. So I need to understand all the worlds, and having a scientific background is really unique. The data scientists don't have that. you know, a lot of people in the commercial world don't have that, so I fit this very unique area.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like my former days when I was at Cell Press, I think that role had almost been created for you, right? Based on your skill sets. If memory serves you right, you essentially pivoted into that role because
Yeah.
of your skills.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where there's a big need in the company, and I had
Yeah.
kind of an aptitude and also an interest, you know. And it's one of the benefits of being at sometimes a smaller company is the opportunity to kind of create new roles. So even if you start at a bench somewhere, there may be an opportunity to switch over to a commercial or business side role. So yeah, it was kind of like I was already working on some of these projects, and the need became bigger. So we created this role and kind of moved me in there.
Very cool. Controlling your own destiny to a degree there.
Yeah, totally.
Um,
And in having, basically, you can't go wrong with having domain expertise, right? That's the key to anything big data or anything machine learning. Like the data scientist can't do it alone. You need those domain experts, and having that biological domain expertise in this field in biotechnology, you can't replace it. Data scientists
Right.
can't do it without us, or in whatever other field, right? Whoever the domain expert is, we need them. We need people like us, people like you, to serve in that role, and it's kind of cool.
Totally. Very cool. Thanks for that. How about Purnima? How would you describe your current role? I think it might be a little more direct to product, but it'd be good to get your insight on how you describe your role, even though you've only been there for a few months. Maybe you could describe the Fujifilm role in combination with the role at Elevate to someone who maybe doesn't have experience on the commercial side.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, my role is directly in business development. So what that means is I am actually helping my company. My company is a technology company where we are looking for partners to come and manufacture their therapies at a company like Elevate, right? So Elevate has the infrastructure for companies, biotech companies, to come and manufacture their therapies. And therapies are cell therapies and gene therapies that actually goes into patients. So we have the infrastructure, the know-how, the talent, the process development teams, all of that at a centralized location. So my job is to actively reach out to partners and essentially understand the science behind what they're doing, and really act as somebody who is an advocate for Elevate, right? So going to these clients and telling them, hey, Elevate is a fantastic company for you to partner with because we have X, Y, and Z capabilities. So please come and work with us. And an example could be, there's a company which could be a venture-backed company, and they really don't have the infrastructure readily available. They don't have the talent. So I can go to them and say, hey, Elevate has everything you need. You can be a virtual company, and all you have to do is come work with us, and we can develop everything you need, starting with a process. All you need is a gene sequence, and we can go from a gene sequence to a product that you can actually deliver to patients. So that's my job. And it's really cool because I get to talk science. I also get to understand the business, and get to talk to all these cool venture-backed companies, venture capital firms. So that's really what I do in a very simplistic fashion. So I hope that's helpful.
No, that is helpful. And actually, we ran into each other. The reason you're on this panel, we ran into each other at Biotech Week here in Boston. So
yes,
Purnima was on the exhibition floor, talking about the tech and seeking out partnerships. So it sounds like you get a lot of face-to-face time, which is, I'm sure, invigorating to speak about the science, but not have to be on the bench. Maybe, right?
Yes, I do miss being on the bench, but I love what I do right now. And really being on the bench is what has really helped me get here, because it's ultimately the science and the technical know-how that is absolutely needed to shine in this kind of a role. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for that. And then I think I'll pivot to Sohail on this question, because I think he's also in a similar role in terms of seeking out partnerships, especially what I know from his experience at Foundation. But Sohail, how do you describe your role to someone who might not have as much experience on the commercial side?
Sure. Yeah, I think, a lot of what Kira and Purnima talked about already, I think a lot of it resonates for me. being kind of in the mix of working with scientists and other functions within an organization, that certainly is similar. In terms of specifics with my role, you know, as a clinical stage biotech company, we have 4 programs in the clinic today. We are planning to and hope to get a 5th one into the clinic next year. You know, so we've really, as a company, Jounce has really specialized in taking programs from target identification to bringing them to, you know, IND clearance and into the clinic, right? But we're a clinical stage biotech company. We have, you know, a total of 150 employees or so. And in order to now advance those programs forward, as you think about phase 3 and commercialization, you really need the resources. Either you need to build that internally and have that capability, or this is where strategic partnerships, you know, working with pharma companies that have those global capabilities and resources to advance programs forward in a very efficient and effective manner makes a lot of sense. So in my role, I'm really, you know, while we're continuing to forward integrate and build those capabilities as these programs, which obviously takes time, as these programs advance, you know, our furthest one is in phase 2 and is getting ready for phase 3. We're seeking and looking to the right types of partnerships. So sourcing different types of opportunities, who would be the right partners to work with us to bring those programs forward. That's one piece. Once we've kind of done that and identified a set of partners and you know, there's mutual interest between us and a certain, say, company A, working on the deal. What does that deal framework look like, and executing on that in a timely way such that, you know, once that the timing of that, their obligations and their responsibilities for taking the program forward coincides with the timeline of the program as well, and there's no delays. So I would say those are a couple of big things from a biotech perspective, that a BD position like mine, that's a big chunk of the responsibility. There's also other things such as in licensing. So, you know, sometimes there's companies that are looking at, okay, this is our internal pipeline. What other programs should we think about bringing into the pipeline to really complement our portfolio and advance and create value and advance the company as a whole? So that's something we look at as well. And then other things, I know Purnima mentioned, but just financing, things of that nature, like VCs and whatnot, talking to them as you continue to, you know, advance these programs to value inflection points, making sure that you're raising funds and continuing to keep the lights on, so to speak, and
Right.
make sure that your company is progressing and advancing is important. So those are some of the different functions that that I'm involved with.
Perfect. Thanks. Very eloquently put. And then Maya, I guess if you could give us some insight on describing your current role. I know that you have a myriad of experiences in past, but with JAX, obviously very close to the science, being a .org, but how do you describe your role to folks who might not have as much experience on the commercial side?
Yeah, so you know, JAX being a nonprofit, I think JAX, people don't really recognize a lot of the things that JAX can do. So we're more on the preclinical side, helping more of the scientists really struggling to either work with their in vivo vendors, or they're trying to get into that preclinical or clinical stage, and they're needing all that data. So we provide a lot of different types of services for them. And so my role is really getting very close to that science and being able to translate it. So going from a scientist and saying, all right, this is what this product or this service can do. And my job is to really kind of be that conduit between our scientists and our customer. And having been a bench scientist for years and going through graduate school and the whole bit, I feel like it gives me unique insight to be like, well, yeah, I would care about that. I would understand that. And I would want to write about that and make sure everybody else knew how cool this is, or this new science. So for me, I think that like a lot of what was echoed already is just being able to use my background and skill set to translate what is a product or a service to a scientist that can help alleviate a problem, and translating it back out to our customers.
Agreed. And I think too, you know, you've all kind of touched on it, right? Knowing the language behind your customer or your potential partner's research, right? What are they doing? So being able to eloquently outline the science, but with a sort of revenue positive, right, business focus, you know, to really highlight the value of who you're representing. So that's great. Thanks to all of you for that. So let's pivot here. I want to know how some of you decided to leave the gold gilded benches of your research side and move into commercial roles. So let's go back to Kira, and why don't you give us some insight on kind of what sparked, what kind of spurred you to move away from the bench?
Sure. So there's a few things. So I was, the very traditional scientist, went and got my PhD in cell biology. And while I was doing that, I realized that a few things. One, that academia was, I don't know how to say this gently. Academia is great and very, very important, but it's pretty cutthroat. It's, publish or perish. Very difficult and competitive to get grants. And I apologize, I'm in a coffee shop, so I hope it's not too loud, the background noise. But as you move further in academia, your focus gets narrower and narrower, right? You become this expert of not just cell biology, but you get to pick like one protein, and then you study that one protein. You just get so narrow. And the way my brain works and what excites me is big picture connections, right? I like being able to understand a little bit of what a lot of different cells do, right? Or a lot of different proteins and how that relates to different diseases, and not just focus on one area. So the ability to expand my brain again and like learn about a lot more things instead of just focusing on one small area, that was a big reason for me to leave the bench and to leave academia specifically. So that was kind of the big thing, was I wanted to talk more about a lot of different science, and also be able to support other people working at the bench, right? I know I'm not as passionate about the bench, but I think it's very important. And so in these commercial roles, I get to support other people and learn about their research and get excited about their research. It kind of like opens up your world again, at least for me. And that was the way I saw it. Again, not trying to offend, academia is very important. They're my customers too, but it just like wasn't for me in the way that my brain works. It's more exciting to expand it for me.
Yeah. You're reminding me of our first installment of Bench to Business. My colleague Tian-Li Chen, who's at GenScript now, described his experience at the NIH. With all due respect to the NIH, he's like, I hated it because of just being, like you said, so focused on one particular area, whereas he really felt he wanted to kind of be able to expand and be boundless, right, and sort of help lots of people with different areas of research. So, well, certainly being at CST, you're at a good place to be close to the science. So that's great. Purnima, how about you? What was sort of the trigger to take you away from the bench? Pursue something in BD.
Sure. I'm going to be honest and say that I felt a little bit stagnant being on the bench. I was cranking out experiments day and night, going into the lab. It was awesome. I loved how technical it was, and I was able to, be part of papers and, really contribute to our PI or investigators getting the funding that they needed. But honestly, I didn't see the true translational aspect to the work, right? I wanted to be close to the real, translational part of it, where I'm close to the patients and how is it really helping patients. And although the work that I was doing had some impact, I just wanted to feel a little bit more connected to the overall process. And that really helped me, helped me make a decision that, okay, I should probably see what is out there. And I started speaking with all the different vendors coming into the lab. I started speaking with their managers and just really voraciously networking within those companies that were just coming to the lab and truly understanding the nuances between the different roles that they had. And I was like, I can do this. Like, this seems like a very exciting place to be. I can talk science, I can communicate, I can ask the right questions, and I love meeting people. So why not combine all of those things to really get into sales/BD? And that's really what spurred my interest, to be honest with you. It's just a combination of, feeling a little bit stagnant, but also wanted to be really close to the translational side of things. And that's really how I got into it. So it was not an easy transition. It took some time, but also I think it's very much doable and something that you just have to work on and keep growing your network to make it happen. So I hope that's helpful.
No, that is helpful. I think that's also a great roadmap for everyone on the call here, in the audience. Just talk to your product reps from Sartorius and CST and Thermo that come in, right? This is a way to, and I say it jokingly, but right. I mean, that's a really interesting perspective that you essentially they're coming in to sell their tech, and that's probably a good opportunity to network, right? And find out more about what they're doing and what they like, similar to what we're doing here. So thanks, Marnina, that's helpful. Let's go to Sohail on that. What took you away from the bench? I mean, I think at Foundation, if memory serves me right, when we talked some months back, you were on the scientific side, or maybe I'm misremembering, but maybe give us some insight into what took you away from being directly connected to the research.
Sure. Yeah. And again, here, I think a couple of things that were mentioned already resonate too, because I think for me, being able to play in the big picture type situation, being able to have more of a direct impact on patients, not to say the lab isn't, but it just was, I think I felt that I could add more value, and a lot of it would resonate more with my skill set and my personality, which I think that was actually a big factor, just understanding when I was working in the lab. So even before Foundation, and you're right that I was working initially the first couple of years I was in the lab at Foundation. Before that, I was at Genzyme Genetics working in their diagnostic lab, running the experiments and whatnot. And I think one thing that is different from a clinical diagnostic lab versus a research lab is, within a research lab you're doing different experiments, you can try different things, versus with a clinical diagnostic lab, while it's obviously very important work, and this is, you're working with live patient samples, a lot of it is very monotonous. And so for me, that was starting to kind of, I just felt like I was part of an assembly line that was just kind of doing the same thing over and over again. Again, not to speak badly, but that's how I felt. And I wanted to, my personality involves working on different challenges, different types of situations, and coming up with solutions. And I felt like I wasn't getting that there. So that started the process. And to Purnima's point, it takes time. It took me some time. I was trying to leave Genzyme and find a business role, but since I had no business background, nobody would hire me in a business setting. And so my initial role within Foundation was, working in the lab, but it was, the plan was always to be in the lab for a couple of years and hopefully then transition out, learn some skills there and transition out either at Foundation or elsewhere, to be working in the business side. And fortunately, it happened at Foundation, and it was a great experience. But that's kind of, those were kind of the factors that played a role for me in terms of why I decided to move out of the lab.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point that you raised at the last part, because I know that when we talked, I think you were working on a bit of a, in the easiest way to explain it, it was a pet project, right, that you were kind of doing on the side, if memory serves me right. And that sort of translated right into almost like Kira's story of like some of the work you're doing sort of creates your role. So, right, you were doing something on the side that caught attention, right? And then that sort of pushed you into a BD role.
That's right.
Just a brief description. I don't remember exactly the ins and outs, but
yeah, no, your memory is right, and it's
Yeah.
good memory. So for me, while I was at Foundation, in terms of how I did the transition, I was in the lab, and nobody was just going to hand me or give me out a business role. So for me, it was okay. One also was validating that I actually did want to be in a non-lab or non-scientific role. So what I did was there's a couple things I would recommend. One was I was fortunate that it was a small company at the time. It was only about 20-25 people, so it was still a startup. But I decided to just shadow people in non-business roles. So that included finance. The first person who was the head of sales joined after me.
Oh, not non-bench roles, you meant non-bench roles.
Sorry, non-bench roles. Sorry,
Yeah.
non-bench roles. Yep. BD, marketing, finance. Those were the kind of the four that I decided to just kind of, spend some time outside of my regular job learning what they do. And then once I kind of gauge which ones would be interesting, their day-to-day, what that looks like, take on a couple of side projects that I did outside of my regular work hours, just to, again, see whether doing the work itself was going to be of interest to me. So I did it in BD and also in marketing. And then after that exercise, I think, which took about 4 or 5 months, I started to gravitate more towards business development. And I really I think this was pointed out earlier, just that the cross functionality of it. You still are connected and close to the science. You're working with finance, you're working with, project management, all different clinical development, all different functions within the organization. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And that ultimately kind of made me then pursue an opportunity there, which opened up. A role was created. And how that happened was one of the BD projects that I did, It was just one of those that it was fortunate that it got to the level where I got the opportunity to present it to the management team. And I think that really showed, okay, this person can go out there and do these types of projects and is really interested in business development. And so once the company was growing, once the role was created and naturally was a need to fill that, I threw my hat in the ring and expressed interest, and kind of having that project there, having the credibility of having worked there for a couple of years, all of it really helped to ultimately make the transition. But it all took
Cool.
time. This was, not a 1 month or 2 month process. So
Yeah, and I think also, a couple takeaways there, right? Sort of obviously defining what you think you want to do by getting out there and experiencing, right? And sort of shadowing. And I think also we're all talking about staying closer to the research, but I think Purnima mentioned it too, is sort of seeing the impact of what you're doing, right? Seeing the trajectory of the research process to the point of delivery, right? Or at least discovery, right? So actually being there in a BD role, you're able to sort of see all those steps. It's not just, it comes off the bench and it sort of goes into some amorphous blob of discovery and delivery, right? You're actually able to see the process through, touching various departments. So cool. Well, thanks for that. And then I think I hit everyone with that question. Maya, did we talk about why you left the bench?
We didn't. So I can.
Do you want to share that?
Yeah, I can share. So I guess my path, as I like to describe it, it's not straight. It's windy. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I think a lot of the sentiments that were already echoed definitely went through my mind. So, when I came out of my PhD, I was like, oh, I don't want academia. I wasn't a fan of it. I wanted to definitely get out into industry. And I was like, okay, well, my choices are bench scientists, because that's what I saw. That was kind of like promoted. So I got onto the bench. I was with the startup company and I was like, this is cool. But, like others on the panel have said, you just feel kind of stagnant. I felt like there's something more I wanted to do. I was teaching as an adjunct on the side. So I was kind of like, oh, maybe that's kind of cool. Can I do that for a bit? And I realized I didn't really like doing teaching full time. So for me, I felt like it was more like, do I want to try this? Let's try this. Then let's back off and try something else and kind of keep moving that skill set until I found the thing that I really liked, which is more of the content marketing and content management. And for me, that it allowed me to still stay really close to that science and just kind of find my way through it. And even then I took some side steps and I went and I did like project management and worked for an agency to see if, well, did that hold? And do I like it? Not so much, not for me. That's cool. Let's pivot back and kind of make the role as I want it. And, for me, my role, I think is blossomed and changed depending upon what we needed. The Jax doesn't have the deepest pockets in the world. So for us, it's cool to be in a place that allows you to kind of morph and change your role depending on what you like to do. And it kind of help you grow professionally. So for me, it was being able to pivot and doing all these opportunities that are in front of me and being able to also experiment and still be really close to it. And yeah, just kind of walk with that.
Yeah, and I think the changes too, right? As I mentioned earlier, the sort of being able to describe the science behind your customers' research, like you're at the forefront of that, right? In terms of really articulating, Jax's value proposition and flexing the expertise, right, of Jax's role, in the model community. So great. Well, that's awesome. Let's pivot here again. So we've touched on some of my questions. Actually, this is what I was hoping for, that I wrote down some questions and you guys have been covering and answering questions that I haven't even asked yet. So bravo to all the panelists for that. But let's go to Purnima. How did you go about developing your transferable skills? So as you were kind of identifying, right, you talked about product managers and representatives, the salespeople coming into your lab. How did you go about sort of harnessing the right skill sets to apply them to your current role and maybe your previous role at Fujifilm?
Yeah, it's a great question. It really made me think too. And so I think one of the things that I did was I actually had a mentor who I actually met on LinkedIn. I cold called a bunch of people on LinkedIn. I wrote to random people on LinkedIn after seeing their job profiles. And I said, can I just conduct an informational interview about yourself so I can really understand what your career path is like? So I was able to identify a mentor, who was in the same field as I was in, and I met him for lunch, every month or so, and really, developed my business skills by just having conversations with him. The other things that I did was I read a lot of press releases on new company mergers and acquisitions, new technologies that were being developed, partnerships. You see like these press releases talking about strategic long-term manufacturing collaborations, licensing of technologies, and really trying to understand what the business terms are by reading those press releases and having a conversation about those. So those are some of the things that I did. And I guess speaking with the licensing technology offices out of universities like MIT and Harvard, and having a conversation with people in those offices to really understand what is the new tech that is coming out, what are the new investigators that you're working with, and what VCs are you working with, and things of that nature. So I think just networking and talking to all of these different people who are part of the puzzle piece and bringing this ecosystem together, I think that's how I have really been able to develop some of the skills that is needed to, I guess, survive and do well in this business role. Happy to answer more targeted questions, but this is kind of just the basics of what I was doing.
No, that's very helpful. And that's why you're all here, right? We want the candor of just your experience, right? In moving into these roles. I think I'll pass on Sohail with this one because he answered the question before I even asked it, which was, sort of shadowing people in various departments. I will give him the opportunity to jump in, but I feel like he covered that. So I'll move to Kira. Obviously you and Sohail both got an MBA together at BU. So certainly that is a way of developing some skill sets for BD roles. But how did you go about maybe the early days of figuring out when you made the decision you wanted to leave the bench? What were some of the ways that you sort of morphed yourself into becoming more of a business-driven scientist?
Sure. And I don't want anybody to think that you have to get an MBA. You absolutely do not. I'm a learner and I love book learning. So for me, an MBA was one additional way, but I was already working in business. And in fact, maybe Sohail, you'll say this too, I don't remember, but like most people have their company pay for their MBA. So that is the preferred route. Like don't go and pay. You've already done all the work. If you have a PhD or your undergrad, try and get somebody else to pay for the MBA if you really think it's necessary. That's the way I learn. I really love it. And my company was on board to support me. So I really enjoyed it. But I got into business way before that. And there's all sorts of different types of work that is non-bench work. You don't have to be a fancy business development manager or something, right? I started out right from being a bench scientist, going into review editing and scientific writing. And there's tons of like content creation and content editing roles. I mean, look at Gordon used to work at Cell Press, right? And they have editors and people that are non-bench scientists anymore. And we even have those internally at CST, part of the marketing department. We need people to create the content who, again, are subject matter experts. And I can't remember if I sent it privately in chat or not, but what I recommend to people, if you're on the bench now, think of the other skills that you have. And I think even Sohail pointed this out, like, what is your personality like? What other skills have you developed or are you developing? One of them, we've all peer-reviewed papers, probably. If you're a PhD scientist, maybe you've written papers, maybe you're really good at writing grants or writing content. I also was managing several people, right? I was managing undergrads and things. So you're building people skills, you're building other communication skills. Maybe you loved oral presentations at your poster, or you presented at a lot of conferences. Think of all the other things, are you organized? All of these things are transferable skills. And so think about those and you really emphasize those in your applications and in your interviews. And do a ton of LinkedIn searching too, and see what they're looking for in the job descriptions, and then kind of like work on those skills, or at least emphasize the ones that you do have. You don't need to be 100% fit for any role ever. And I think as bench scientists, we're kind of scared of that because we like to follow the rules sometimes, but you never have to 100% fit what they're looking for. You may offer something above and beyond, right, in some areas and less in another. And that could be enough. Or just getting in and having the conversation. Maybe there's another role that's not published yet at that company. Just start having the conversations. I think a few people have mentioned it. The mentoring, the networking, just talking to people about you and your interests is like the only way. You just got to start doing it too. So I hope that was kind of helpful. Use the variety of skills you have that are not just science, right? People, communication, all of that can help to get you in. And there's a ton of different roles out there, not just traditional business, but content, marketing, creative roles, all sorts of things. That's how I started out too. I was actually a publisher with my first job out of my PhD.
Yeah, it's interesting with the publishing side, because I do find, the nice thing with these roles that everyone's touched on is that you're not leaving the science behind, right? You're not sort of, or going to the dark side, right? As some of my scientist friends put it. But I think that, publishing is a common stop because you're still close to the science, very close, right? You're actually looking at manuscripts. But a lot of my former editors actually went back, right? They went to the Broad to run labs, but maybe doing commercial side, things like that. So good. Well, that's helpful. Let's see. Maya, how did you go about honing some of those skills for your role? It sounds like Kira probably touched on some of those things in terms of writing content, but what are some of the ways that maybe you honed your skills to fit the role that you're in now?
Yeah, so like Kira was saying, I think that, as scientists, we definitely want to check off every single tick box and be like, yes, I've done this, I've got this, I've got this, I've got this. But really, it's looking at what you can do. So if you have a background in cell biology, start looking up on LinkedIn and just start seeing what jobs really kind of catch your eye, and then start looking to see what kind of skills they have and they're looking for, and see what you align with. That's what I started doing. That's occasionally what I still do, to make sure that I keep myself really marketable to keep driving my career path forward. As I said, my path was not straight. It's really windy. Like everybody here, we didn't just kind of plunge right into it. So for me, I think it's looking up some of those job descriptions and kind of understanding what are people looking for and what is it that I like, what is it that I want to do, and look to see what do I have in my little bag of tricks. When we come out of our grad school, whether it's or just any type of university or school setting, and that formalized lab training, you come out and you think you're not able to do anything. It's so not true. You can do lots of things, whether that is from planning experiments and organizing them, or looking at resources, defining budgets. Maybe you've made purchasing decisions, and maybe you know a product really well, so maybe you want to get into product marketing or product management, and just start looking up on LinkedIn to see what kind of jobs there are and what kind of catches your eye. I think that really helps. And like I said, I periodically do it now just to kind of keep my career moving forward, making sure I still have those skills that are marketable.
Totally. And I think also there's a, touching on your training and your background, there's definitely, when we're working with our employers on drafting their job descriptions on Seismic, to try and bring in the talent that they're looking for, we have very active conversations about what is it you're looking for in terms of skills. And if it's a BD role, for example, do you really need someone who is like fully versed in qPCR and Western blot and ELISA, right, has all these really highly technical skills? Or do you maybe need someone who has, a bachelor's in biology or a master's, but has 10 years of industry experience, right? So it's an active conversation that we have, because I think that sometimes that can be lost, where it's like, we need this exact scientist for this role versus this scientist, Maya has the skills we're looking for to sort of mold her into what we want, right? And I think that certainly is a theme that we've seen more, and we're driving that narrative because, if we approach, hiring and everyone finding their roles in that way, then we're going to get the best outcomes, right? leveraging skills versus, trying to cookie cut. So that's great. Thank you. Well, I think I'm being a pretty good time cop. I'm looking at my watch and we are 14 minutes to close. I said to Aaron I would stop at 1:15. So this is pretty close. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Aaron. I know there's been a flurry of questions, which I've really, really wanted to read, but I haven't been able to because I've been moderating. But I've seen a lot of activity going back and forth between moderator or panelists and attendees. So Aaron, why don't you go ahead and if there are some questions you want to direct to the panelists from the audience, feel free to do that.
Yes, definitely. And the panelists have been really good about a lot of the questions have already been answered, but I'm going to pull out some of the ones that haven't been touched on. And this will be open to any of the panelists to answer these. So we've talked a lot about transitioning from a research role to a non-bench role, but a concern we get a lot is, what if I'm wrong and I want to go back to research? How hard is it to make that reverse transition back to a bench role if you try out a non-bench role and decide it's not for you?
And maybe I can. Oh, go ahead, Kira. You had your hand up. I wasn't following the etiquette.
Her virtual
I don't
hand.
know the etiquette either. I'll be like 2 seconds and then you can take it off. All I was going to say is I've never seen it done, which is indicative of itself that it's not a bad choice. So that's all I was going to say. So if you've seen it done, Sohail, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it done either, but I just was thinking about, in my situation, if that were to happen, right? I think when I was at Foundation, I think that the couple things one thing I mentioned too is all about kind of the relationships. If you had built good relationships from the start, right, and continued to have that, they understand too that they're taking a risk putting someone in a position who doesn't have experience, which is what they did with me there. So if I had the relationships and assuming there was no politics or whatnot, and the lab was I'd done a good job in the lab and would be welcoming of me coming back, I think that could have happened. Now, that's the internal case. For external, I think if you've built your whole career has been kind of on the bench side, I don't think it would be that hard actually to go back out, externally find a new opportunity back in the bench if you felt the non-bench role was not working out for you.
Thank you. So for the next one, I think we'll ask Maya and Parima for this one. So for R&D roles, at least in academia, publications are really, really important, maybe less so in industry, but can you talk a little bit about applying to non-bench roles? Do publications factor in at all or not so much? Maya first.
So I think for my roles, they did just because they did initially just because I was looking at more content type of roles and more writing type of roles. So for me, having the publications under my belt to really show what I could do helped. Although I will say that writing for publications and writing for marketing is slightly different. And how you write. So, but having had the manuscripts under my belt, I think did help just to show that I could speak knowledgeably about the science and in grave detail. And then you can always, kind of make the point of being able to transfer that up and kind of do that really 30,000 foot view and get out of the weeds and then go back into them. So having that, I think did help.
But maybe not like impact factor or anything like that.
I don't think it did. Although looking back on it, I mean, I was happy to get publications when I was in grad school. So anything was like, it published, thank God, yes. But whether it published in a journal with a high impact factor or didn't, coming out from a non-academia and into a non-bench role, I don't think it mattered, the impact factor of the journal, no.
And Parima, for your roles, would you say publications have a big impact?
I don't think so. Although, Sohail, you're in BD. I think there's a lot of ways you can actually perceive a BD role. A BD role is very different in a company like a service provider company like a Fujifilm versus a BD role that I guess Sohail is doing, which is at Jounce, which is a biotech. Actually, my BD role at Elevate is also dramatically different from what I used to do at Fujifilm. So I think if your role is highly technical and the pool of applicants applying to that role, have a degree which is a master's degree or higher, so a master's, PhD, and so on, of course, if it comes down to like 3 candidates and they all have PhDs, maybe they would look at the publications to decide, but ultimately it's really about how you're advocating for yourself in that interview. So I personally don't think publications matter that much. But of course, if there's a person who has 20 publications and they're applying for this role, of course, they might have an upper hand, but I don't think there is like a direct impact. I think it's all about just, expressing how interested you are and really being able to communicate. And yeah, I think that's really what's going to get you in. So, I mean, Sohail and others, like, feel free to, agree or disagree,
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's really well said, Purnima. I think, again, in your new role in this BD role, you're not going to be put in charge or be a big part of a team that's going out and putting out publications. So that's not what they're looking for, right? But to Purnima's point, if it comes down to 1 or 2 or 3 candidates and you have 20 versus the other have 1 or 2, that maybe there's a slight chance maybe that plays a role. But I really don't think that's what they're looking for. But what instead Purnima said, that how you present yourself and kind of what value they envision you bringing in, that's kind of going to be the determining factors.
And Kira, you mentioned a bit about getting different experiences, like when you're examining an MBA versus not getting an MBA. We have someone who says they're applying to these type of roles, and they tend to check all the boxes except for customer-facing experience, and that's what they keep getting held back on. Is there any way you can think of in academia to get that experience, or is it more of a way of showcasing your communication transferable skills and your ability to adapt to that?
So yes, there are some ways in academia to get some of that experience. Think of customer as like any user, anybody you're working with. Like, expand your perception of customer, think outside the box a little bit. And I think I just replied in the chat a little bit, right? Like, are you or your coworkers a customer of that company? For example, to use antibodies, I used antibodies during my PhD. I was a customer of cell signaling technology. Who better to understand the needs of the CST customers than someone who was one, right? So there's all sorts of different ways to kind of position yourself. It's helping the hiring manager see you through that lens. You need to help them understand your unique skills and how they fit in the role. And what I was just about to keep typing too is, use your cover letters. Do not ditch them, even if it's optional. Your cover letter is super important for trying to transition into a different field or industry. As a hiring manager, we do read them. They are very important to get you in the door, but I would position myself and say, yeah, here's why I'm customer facing, right? Because I did a collaboration with another lab and I owed them things, right? Like, it was like I was performing a service for them, and here's how I related to them, and give examples from, get creative about what a customer is. It's a collaborator. It's maybe a collaborator at a different university or something, or another lab in your building or whatever, or just the fact that you have used the product. You are a scientist now, so you understand what this company is serving or who they're serving, or if you're going to look for biotech, biopharma, maybe you've had a family member or know somebody who's had a treatment from that place or something, right? Like, there's so many different ways to relate to and be customer facing. You have to kind of get creative and, again, allow that hiring manager to understand and see you through that lens. Cover letters I can't stress them enough. They still are really important, especially when you're trying to do this industry switch.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any thoughts on how to kind of gain or pitch good customer facing experience?
I was just going to add, I'm not a panelist, but I just thinking when Kira was talking, probably tuning up your LinkedIn profile too, right? So if you're doing the cover letter in that way, maybe kind of tweaking your LinkedIn profile to include some of those elements that'll make you more marketable for those types of roles.
If you're working in a company or in a lab, you are constantly presenting your work to your coworkers. I think that's what I think Kira mentioned too. I think that pitch that you're making to your team, you're convincing your internal stakeholders of your data, whatever you're trying to do. So I think that is a great experience in my mind, and that really helps you.
Thank you. Another concern we hear quite often, especially moving away from academia, is the fear that of staying too long. You know, if you've been in academia, and I know Kira, you mentioned you didn't do a postdoc because you know what you wanted to leave the bench, but Maya, you were part-time an adjunct professor for a little while. So I might start with this question for you. How do you combat the idea that sometimes you hear people think that they're too academic to be in a non-academic role?
Oh yeah, I think that there's no such thing as being too academic. I think that you can always take your skills and really think about what it is you want to be doing. What is it that excites you? And where do you want to take your career? Because that's really what it is. And if you're considering life off of the bench, then you really want to just take a good look at like what does your perfect day look like? What is it that you're going to be doing in that perfect day that really gets you like, oh yeah, I really want to do that. It gets really fired up with it. And then you take it from there. After I left my PhD and like here, I decided I didn't want to do a postdoc. I went right into industry and I was there for almost 7 years. And I thought no one's going to want me after that because that's all I know how to do. But that's not the case. You can always take those skills and pivot them. It's just how you present it and what it is that you want to do. And it can change. I'm living proof that it changes and that's okay. It's okay to take your career and let it meander. Because I think that gives you that background and skill set that as you go forward in your career, it really takes you to where you want to be because now you have this really well-rounded package besides your academics and besides your science.
I'm going to pass it back to Gordon. I'm going to first say thank you everyone before I leave for attending, and I will pass it to Gordon now to thank our panelists and close the event.
I can't thank Sohail, Kira, Maya, and Purnima enough for taking the time. This has been our most popular event theme that we've ever done in terms of attendance. There is clearly a thirst from the community, from scientists by trade, to pursue roles away from the bench and continue to apply their skill sets to drive innovation and discovery. So really excited to keep this theme going. And thank you again to the panelists and thanks to the audience as well.
Thanks as well. Really enjoyed it. And it was a very engaging audience, which is awesome. And thank you to the panelists as well. Nice meeting everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Sohail.
Bye.
Thanks, Gordon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Gordon, for having us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, totally. Thanks, guys.
Bye. Take care.